My name is Gail Curry and I look after the Baptist Women's Department of the Association of Baptist Churches in Ireland. And I have Melissa Kruger today, and I'm so glad you're able to join us, Melissa. And tell us a wee bit about what you do and where you're living and just how you find life during the strange days that we're living in.
My name's Melissa, and I actually work for the Gospel Coalition. I'm director of our women's initiatives there. And the good news about my job is I work from this desk even when it's not locked down. So this is my home office, and we kind of are all over the country. We don't have a set office that we work from. So I was actually Zooming before COVID, which is, our team Zoomed before we had to live this way. And so in a lot of ways, my life didn't look extremely different. I was like, maybe I live in lockdown mode, which might be kind of sad. But this is what we do. We Zoom and we talk and we direct these women's initiatives through a lot of great people and great resources that we do for TGC. So thankfully, we've been well. Our family's been all well. So the time has not looked, it's definitely looked different, but it has surprisingly not looked as different as I know a lot of people's worlds have looked. So I've been thankful for that.
It is amazing the technology that we have and how we have been able to adapt, I think, in these times that we've had here as well. Lockdown for us came in towards the end of our women's ministry course that Baptist Women run. And so when we went into lockdown, we decided, well, we'll do something online. And we did your contentment course that you have through Ligonier. And we just found that so helpful. You pointed us to our God who is sovereign and good, who is in control of our circumstances and who uses our circumstances to make us into the women he wants us to be. And I have to say, we found that so helpful. And especially as we came into total lockdown, which was very strange and quite scary for a lot of people. So thank you so much for making that available for us to be able to go through. But you do have a new book that has come out in the States. I think it's due for release here on the 31st of July. Growing Together, Taking Mentoring Beyond Small Talk and Prayer Points.
Yes.
Tell us why you wanted to write that book.
Yeah. It's actually been the book that I probably wanted to write for about 10 years. And part of it was before I worked at TGC, I worked in my local church doing women's ministry. And I did that for, like I say, around 10 years. And what I had a lot of younger women desperate they wanted to know older women. They wanted advice. They wanted insight that older women had. And so when they would ask an older woman, would you mentor me? The older women would be like, what does she want me to do with her? I don't know what on earth am I supposed to do? And so there was this disconnect between the younger women and the older women. How can we come together and have spiritual conversations? So a lot of times it just kind of devolved into, we'll just get coffee and catch up. But it wasn't necessarily going towards spiritual growth. It was relationship. And it's good to have relationships and friendships with people in all stages of life. That's great to have. But mentoring, I see as a little bit different. Spiritual mentoring, it's normally for a set season where you say, I really want someone to ask me questions about important spiritual disciplines. Really, I mean, spiritual growth is just as basic as physical health. If you ask anyone, how do I stay in shape? It's exercise and eat right. I mean, that's what every physical plan basically comes down to. And the same is true for spiritual growth. It's not difficult, but it's really hard to do on our own. We need one another. And so what I tried to do in this book, it's not actually a book about mentoring so much as it's a book that like you and I could do together. And so each chapter walks through important parts of our relationship with God, our relationship with the world, and our relationship with the church. And so we talk about topics like prayer, we talk about evangelism, we talk about temptation, we talk about contentment, We talk about suffering and trials and all these different things. And it allows the mentor and the mentee basically a springboard for those discussions to take place. So rather than kind of feeling like you're being intrusive with someone saying, well, so tell me about your prayer life, the chapter you can kind of use as the springboard to have that conversation and say, well, she said this about prayer. What's your favorite way to pray? And so it just leads your conversation rather than being about the weather and how bad it's been for a week. You know, it leads your conversation naturally into the things of God, because I find that we want those real conversations, but sometimes we have a hard time getting there. So I was hoping to kind of provide a pathway for women to be able to have those real and deep conversations. That was my goal in writing it.
That sounds ideal, just really to bring those spiritual conversations around in a very natural way. I mean, do you think that mentoring is something that you do with someone for the rest of your life, with that same person? How do you see that then working out?
Yeah, and actually that's in chapter 2. Chapter 1 and 2 do talk a little bit about mentoring, because I really do think it's very important to set expectations. And so because you really can't commit to someone for the rest of their life except one spouse. Like that's what I mean, and your children. You're committed to your but in the church, you may move, they may move, I mean, so I think it's really actually healthy to make sure from the beginning that you say, hey, let's meet once a month for a year, or maybe we'll meet once a week for 12 weeks, or maybe we'll meet every other week for this amount of time. Sometimes you say, let's read this book together. I do think it's really helpful to set the date and time so that then you're not both trying to scramble and your relationship devolves into this, oh yeah, we should get together sometime. So I have a woman right now that I'm mentoring, and we walk once a month on Friday. And then we just talk about the chapter contents, and that's our time together. But we set the time, we set the method, we're walking together. And again, if it's raining or something, we just have coffee or we do that. But we worked it into when both of our schedules were available, so that we could have this time. And we knew, and it was on the schedule. And that just helps so much, rather than, oh, I think it's been about 3 weeks or 4 weeks, maybe we should get together again. That's when it can kind of frustrate both people. And I think it's really important for both people to have an expectation. You'll do the work. If you're the mentee and want to be mentored, you have to do the work. It's not just the older woman coming in and pouring into you. As you bring your questions and you bring, I don't know what to think about this, and then a really good mentoring relationship can happen.
So you need to be more deliberate about it. Yeah, thanks very much. Then you've also backed the book up with interviews that you've done with other women, and just tell us a wee bit more about that. Is that maybe just to draw out a wee bit more practically how the whole mentoring thing kind of can work and operate?
Yeah, I mean, one thing I did not want people to think was this book is the only way to mentor. And so purposely what I did in these interviews was to say, just share how you have been mentored and how you've mentored others. And most of them are actually very organic. It could be seasonal. You're a younger mom and you reach out to an older mom to say, I don't know what I'm doing with these children. It could be topical. You have an older woman in your church, and every time you hear her pray, you think, that woman knows how to pray. And people would reach out to them and say, can you help me with my prayer life? So it could be on a topic like prayer, or you see a woman who just seems to evangelize by walking through the grocery store, and you say, will you help me know how you do this? So a lot of it happened as people just live life on life in community together. But what I was just trying to provide was another option when that's not happening, or when people are struggling to figure out how to do this, just another pathway to follow. But there are so many good paths in how we can invest in the next generation coming behind us. And so that's what I've loved reading in these stories. And I see some common themes. I mean, one of the biggest common themes is local ministry matters. I think sometimes we can think, oh, I'll be mentored by reading articles on this website or by reading this person's book. And I think those can be wonderful stand-ins. When my husband and I were first married, we moved every year for the first 5 years of our marriage. I didn't even have time to figure out who to get coffee with. Yeah, and so books really were mentors to me, and some by women were, but that's not a long-term solution. We need real people in our real life, who can come alongside of us. And so that's been the one commonality I've seen. It's always just the faithful women in the local church who are just living their life. And what they do is they embody what it looks like to live gospel-centered lives. And we need that. We need to see what kindness means. We need to see what love means. We need to see what patience means. And we see it best when it's lived in front of us, rather than, it's really easy to be perfect in an article. But we need to see real women who aren't perfect, who are just trying to walk with the Lord in the midst of a fallen world. And so I'm a big proponent of local mentoring ministry.
And it works two ways too, doesn't it? The younger woman also encourages the older woman as they do meet together and talk through things.
Yeah.
You have so many projects on the go at the minute. You have another project, Let's Talk, which is a new podcast. Tell us a wee bit about that just as we finish off.
Yeah, it's been so much fun. Two friends, Jasmine Holmes and Jackie Hill Perry, and I just talk on this Let's Talk podcast, and it's really all discipleship topics. So in a world that kind of is always talking about the next big thing, we're actually not talking about those things. We're talking about how to fight sin. We're talking about how to be content. That was what this week's episode was on, contentment. We're talking about how to share your faith. And we're talking about, how to be hospitable in our home. So we just try to we feel like there are so many topics in the Bible that just don't get talked about much. And so we wanted to just be three women sitting around a table talking in hopes that it would encourage other women to sit around their tables and talk about these topics too. So that was our goal. It's been a lot of fun. It was a lot of fun to record them, and it's just great to be able to have conversations about Christ, because it's life-giving. And I think we miss out when we talk about just the local news or whatever is going on. So we're trying to turn our conversations to these eternal things, and hopefully our eyes and our hearts to those things as well.
Well, they're really interesting podcasts. You sound like you're really good friends. It is just like you're sitting having a cup of coffee together and discussing those topics. So I'd certainly encourage the women here to tune in and just listen to your conversations. Melissa, thank you so much for taking time just to meet up over Zoom, for just telling us about your new book, telling us about the different projects you have going on, and just thank you so much for the way you use the gifts that God has given you to encourage women in His Word. So thank you for being with us.
Oh, thanks for having me. It's so good to see you.